Now, in the past few minutes, the Israeli Prime Minister has arrived in Downing Street for his first meeting with Theresa May since she became Prime Minister. Number 10 has said that Mrs May wants to talk trade with Benjamin Netanyahu. Britain is Israel's second biggest trading partner. But it's also reported that she will restate the UK's opposition to settlement building in the occupied Palestinian territories. Well, we're joined now from Broadcasting House by James Serene of the pro-Israel think tank BICOM. Welcome to you, James Serene. I'll come to you in just a moment. Nicholas Soames, how tough should Theresa May be with Mr Netanyahu over continued settlement building in the West Bank and East Jerusalem?
Well, I think she should be firm. I mean, I don't think it's a question of being tough. I think she should be firm and express the views, long-held views of the governments of both types, that settlement building is extremely unhelpful and that the pace that is going on at the moment, there will be no way for a two-state solution. So I think is absolutely the key to moving forward on this. So I think she should be firm, respectful. They are allies and friends, but I think it's important that she will make that point, and I know she will. How
will that be received, James Serene, by Benjamin Netanyahu being told firmly, if respectfully, to stop building settlements, Jewish settlements in occupied territories?
Well, I think there's an interesting domestic political game that goes on in Israel, where particularly people on Netanyahu's right flank are wanting to hear announcements about expanding settlements. And that's something that Netanyahu does a lot. Just last week, he dismantled an illegal settlement on the West Bank, and he was clear that the pictures that would send out of them dismantling a settlement would cause him domestic political damage. So it's not surprising that they then announced very quickly the building of new settlements. But if I can say, I think settlements are very much Israel's problem. Israel's shown in the past it has made generous offers to the Palestinians, and it is said it will dismantle many of the settlements in the outer edges of the West Bank in any deal with the Palestinians. So much as they might announce new building, they will have to dismantle those and evacuate them if the Palestinians ever do accept any of the Israeli offers.
Right, but does it also point to the fact that actually belief in a two-state solution with a viable Palestinian state has pretty well disappeared in Israeli circles?
Well, I think this has been going on for a long time, and I think, you know, the very pro-peace wing, particularly the Labour Party in Israel, was destroyed not by settlements, it was destroyed by Hamas terrorist attacks. It's basically undermined this idea that if Israel gave up land, it would get peace. That's been a trajectory for a while. Israel left Gaza in 2005, and ever since then, they've had missile attacks into mainland Israel. So in the Israeli domestic political arena, giving up land has led to very, very, very difficult results.
Right. So, Kate Hoey, what leverage does the UK actually have to persuade Mr Netanyahu, even if he is, as James Serene says, dismantling some settlements, definitely is a continuation of others?
Well, we are a friend of Israel and they are an ally of ours. So we have the kind of, I think, the kind of way that Theresa May, I hope, will deal with the Prime Minister will be to be very firm, as Nicholas has said, but also to make it clear that we respect international law. And whether they liked it or not, the United Nations did pass that legal judgment or legal vote just before Christmas on the illegal settlements. It's very interesting. It's 100 years this year since the Balfour Declaration went. So we do have a special kind of involvement.
And but it's never had any impact. I mean, settlements have been continued to be built by successive Israeli governments. So, and well, Britain has always restated that it is.
The government of Israel is in breach of endless UN resolutions. I mean, we put that to one side. And Israel actually doesn't pay any attention to anyone very much.
So what difference will it make if there is a special...
I think it is very difficult, but I think it is important that we acknowledge the great injustice that has been done to the Palestinians and the fact that it is important that these settlements do not go on being built. And when the gentleman said that Prime Minister Netanyahu dismantled a tiny settlement, he then announced the building of another 2,000 houses, 2,000 settlements. So I think it is an important point for Netanyahu to acknowledge that there are many people in many countries who feel very strongly that a great injustice has been done and it must be put right.
Right. James Serene, the other thing is that the steady growth of settlements has long been considered, as we've all discussed, in violation of international law. But is there a step change now? Because even the Americans at the last UN vote abstained, and they have always voted against any resolution that condemns Israeli settlement building. Is that a step change that Benjamin Netanyahu is worried about?
Well, I think that resolution was intended as a rebuke to Israel to try and change its policy. And I think, though, there is a debate that continues about whether settlements are the obstacle or one obstacle. And I think Prime Minister Theresa May was very clear when she criticised John Kerry's speech, and she said she didn't think that placing settlements at the heart of the conflict was very constructive.
Britain voted against as well.
Britain did, but she sort of corrected John Kerry's speech, and then since then British diplomacy has actually been going in quite an interesting direction. They believe that direct talks are the only way to solve the conflict, which I would agree with. You know, a secret back channel, direct talks is the only way to do this. Britain didn't participate in the Paris Peace Conference, and Boris Johnson pretty much blocked a communique at the EU Foreign Affairs meeting.
Right, and isn't that because, Nicholas Soames, in the end trade is going to be very important? Israel and Britain have already firm trade links in a post-Brexit world. Theresa May won't risk anything that will imperil a free trade relationship.
I don't believe that Britain's relationship with Israel is going to be imperilled on the trade front by Brexit. I just don't think that's a starter.
No, but by tough talk on...
but I think it's very important to make this point. If you were obsessed about everything being about trade,
they'll look at the Trump meeting, won't they?
No, a big diplomatic... this country plays a big role in international affairs, and it is important that we're not just sort of obsessed solely about trade, that we deal with the major issues. And between Britain and Israel, there is a major disagreement over settlements, and nothing can alter that.
Do you agree with that, though, on trade, Kate Hoey, that actually this is as important or more important than a future free trade deal with Israel?
Oh, I think trade is important, but, you know, there has been an injustice to the Palestinians that has got way down to the bottom of the list of all the other injustices going on around the world. And I really do feel that we have to continue. And the more unity we can have across political parties on this in the United Kingdom, the more strength it gives to the Prime Minister in terms of the resolve that I hope she will be saying to the Israeli Prime Minister that it isn't good enough for them to continue to do what they're doing.
It's important, and following up on what Kate said, you know, the Israelis and the Brits together will want to have a free trade agreement, whatever happens. That's important. And also it's important to emphasise that although we have our profound disagreements, we are very intense collaborators with the Israelis on intelligence, on cyber, on all sorts of other issues, which is what the Prime Minister will be talking to Mr Netanyahu about as well today. It isn't just one thing. It's a whole range of interests.
Just briefly, what did you think about the Americans' idea of moving their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
It's catastrophically stupid, foolish and idiotic, and it will lead to another intifada.
James, lead to another intifada. James Serene, do you agree with that?
Whether they should move the embassy?
Yeah, and would, if they did move it to Jerusalem, would it be an enormous provocation to the Palestinians?
Well, I think there's two sides to this. I mean, on the one hand, you know, Israel's capital is Jerusalem, and West Jerusalem, where the government is positioned, is not really an area of dispute. So for a lot of Israelis, they would say...
Yes, but you know, under a viable Palestinian state, the Palestinians would like to have Jerusalem or East Jerusalem as their capital.
It's perfectly possible to have an American embassy in West Jerusalem and an American embassy in East Jerusalem to the Palestinians.
I hope this will be one of the many things that Trump said he would do that he won't do.
Yeah, well, that, of course, may be the case. James Serene, thank you very much for joining us. Now...